My name's Anne, and I was born in Kingswood, Surrey, which is not very far away from where I am now. I went to boarding school when I was 7 at my own request because I thought I'd have more fun there than staying at home. And the boarding school was quite near, but then I went away to one further away, and I was driven by the determination to be a success. I beat a girl called Lavinia, whom I didn't care for, and that worked because I got my matriculation when I was 15. I don't think anyone's ever heard of that exam now, but it was the sort of difficult school certificate plus having done okay. And then I went home again, and I didn't want to learn domestic science, which I rather regret because I still can't cook. And at my age, it's a disgrace, but I don't care. Mr. Sainsbury's does the cooking for me. Then after school, I spent a bit of time on a farm, just a summer. I think my parents thought I ought to sort of mix with some different people, and I had a great time and I loved it. And then I joined up in the Navy. I got on the train one day at home in Kingswood and went to Queen Anne's Mansions, it was called, where they were signing on people for the services. I didn't bother to tell my parents I was going to do this, and I went to a very severe Wren officer who asked me what I thought I was doing there, and I said I'd like to be a Wren. And how old are you? I was then 17, yes. And she asked me various questions about my schooling, etc. I suppose she was trying to see whether I was normal, bright, or brilliant, whatever. And I came home and I said to my parents, my wonderful parents, I've joined the Wrens. Really? When are you going? I said, well, I don't think I'm going quite yet because I have to be 17 and a half. And I prefer the Wrens because I didn't like the khaki uniform for the ATS, and I had already been in the Junior Air Force before that, so I'd done all that business when I was 15. We went to a place in Mill Hill to be sorted out, and they asked me where I'd like to go. I said, oh, I'm not particular. I'd quite like to be boat's crew. So anywhere on the south coast, I'm not fussy. Anywhere, absolutely anywhere. So what happened? They sent me to Signal School near Manchester. There were, I think, 800 chaps and 400 girls, which was quite a good balance as far as I was concerned. And we were in cabins of three girls together. And we had a sailor guard with a gun outside our window. And I think I learnt a tremendous lot from him. He was a great chatterbox and a cockney, and he knew an awful lot about life, which I hadn't any idea about. Anyway, the lessons were quite difficult. Morse, I can still do slowly. The semaphore, I was never terribly good at semaphore, but I think that the petty officer teaching a semaphore sort of either felt sorry for me or liked me best. I don't know, it doesn't matter. But he said, stand near to me, Anne, so that you can hear the answers. So I passed that very high up. Naughty. And also we had to learn the flags. I don't know whether you know that the flags for the Navy and the Merchant Navy are the same flags, same colours, but different meanings, just to make life thoroughly difficult. Anyway, once I'd passed the exams and so on, I was posted, not to the south coast, guess where? Aberdeen. Couldn't have been much further away, could it? But after many, many hours in the train, sleeping on some soldier's overcoat in the corridor, we got to Aberdeen, and I was ordinary Wren Stevenson. Naval mess. And My friend said, "Is that the description of you or where you're staying?" Wasn't very nice, was it? Anyhow, we were shown where we were going to live. During the war, it's perfectly obvious that the lighthouses had to be turned out, otherwise the Germans would see where we were. So they built things called port war signal stations. And 8 wrens were taken to this port war signal station. There was a room, I suppose, not very much bigger than the room we're sitting in. And 8 of us in bunks, 2, 8, in a room about this size, and 1 bathroom. And about 10 flights of iron steps to get up to the signal station bit, where one did 4 hours on and 4 hours off, which I believe was Nelson's idea. And it was a very tiring performance. You came off at midnight, you had 4 hours sleep, no, less than 4 hours because you had to get dressed. I never bothered to get undressed. And then on again at 8 in the morning, 8 till 12. And then generally I think you did 3.5 days like that, and then you had a day and a night off. And the pay was 6 shillings and 8 pence a day, which doesn't really add up to an awful lot of money, does it? The other girls were 4 of us became great friends. And one friend called Babs had quite a colourful life, and she became my inseparable friend. And I went to her funeral while I was here at the Royal Alfred. She was living in Norfolk, and then she died there. And her daughter is my goddaughter. And she was a wonderful companion, and we laughed our way through the most awful sadnesses somehow. We both of us fell in love badly, of course, with good-looking pilots. Both were killed. Lots of similar things. But we managed. We did quite a good job, I think. Quite a lot of it was terribly, terribly sad, of course. But I did have some quite interesting experiences. I think probably the most interesting was I was the only woman ever to be invited onto Hitler's yacht. When I was in Scotland, back in Rosyth, we didn't have a proper uniform. We had men's bell-bottom trousers, and we cut that bit off and sewed up the sides, and I don't know, made them into women's trousers somehow. But I always looked a bit shabby, and I never had any socks. So bare feet in black lace-up shoes, not terribly glamorous. But I was sort of hanging about, waiting for a truck to take me back to where I was sleeping. Wren's quarters were then in a place called Pittenweem. We used to think that was funny when the Scottish people said it, Pittenweem. We loved it. Anyway, I was waiting for this truck to come, and an American officer came up to me. And my friend and I didn't believe in going with the Americans, because we thought it led to, all these gifts and stuff they kept giving you. They felt they could do what they liked. So we didn't really speak to the Americans. There were very few of them. But an officer came up to me and said, "Aren't you cold?" "Yes, I'm freezing." He said, "You haven't any socks." I said, "I don't have money for socks," which was naughty, wasn't it? And stupid, really, looking back on it. So anyway, the chap came back and he said, "We have bought Hitler's yacht." I think actually it's the ship that follows the yacht. I don't think it was the Grill. My memory is very good for names, I'm lucky. His actual yacht was Grille, and I don't think this was the Grill. I think it was the one that follows behind, like the Queen always had a ship behind her in the Britannia. So he said, "Would you like to come to dinner? We have a German crew, but quite good food." So I said, "Well, how am I going to get there?" He said, "Oh, we'll send a boat for you." Me by myself, Nothing ever frightened me. So the following day, I went back again. I must have had the right sort of watches somehow, managed, and had dinner in the wardroom with a German standing behind each chair, and a very good meal, and sitting next to a fairly dull American captain. But they were all quite sort of civil to me, and they said, now, this is quite an occasion, because you realise you're the first, I think they said, the first woman to come on Hitler's yacht. Certainly not only the first Wren, because nobody else did. You must have a souvenir. What would you like? All these chaps have got wonderful cameras. I said, I couldn't take somebody else's camera. I mean, the fact that they were the enemy, it doesn't make any difference. I said, can you think of something else? And he said, well, what about half a dozen of Hitler's wine glasses? They've got it stamped on the keys of Hamburg. I said, well, they sound fairly okay because they don't belong to anybody, do they? So I was given a box of 6 wine glasses. My husband and I used them, broke 3, and I've just given 3 to somebody else that wanted them, so they've gone. But by which time we had moved, we were apparently in the way in Rosyth, and we moved down the coast quite a long way. I said, how am I going to get back? Oh, don't worry, we're sending a boat for you. And a car. It was really quite, it wasn't a very exciting evening, but it is a one-off, isn't it?